Wave to His Holiness. Hello, Your Holiness. Shall we begin?
Yes.
Okay. Your Holiness, it's really wonderful to see you again and to know you are in such good health. You look great. On behalf of all of your friends at the Mind and Life Institute, I am so happy to welcome you and everyone joining us today for this very special dialogue on the topic of embracing hope, courage, and compassion in times of crisis. We are joined by an esteemed panel who will share their knowledge with you and ask you questions on this timely topic that's so relevant to everyone all over the world. And I'm pleased now to introduce this panel, each who are based in the United States. So the first person on the panel is Professor Alyssa Epple, who is a health psychologist and vice chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of California, San Francisco. She studies how stress resilience and mental training can protect health and promote well-being. She is also studying how to transform distress about climate change to climate action. She also serves as co-chair of the Mind and Life Steering Council. The second person on our panel is Professor Michelle Shiota, who goes by the name Lonnie. She is a research psychologist and director of the Substance Use and Addiction Translational Research Network at Arizona State University. She investigates positive emotions and emotion regulation with regard to close personal relationships and behavior change. And she has authored significant publications in the area of emotions. And the moderator for this discussion is someone you know well, Your Holiness, Professor John Dunne. And Professor Dunne holds the title of Distinguished Chair in Contemplative Humanities at the Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also holds the Department Chair of Asian Languages and Cultures at the University of Wisconsin, and he's a Mind and Life Fellow. And as always, we are joined by Thupten Jinpa, Your Holiness's longtime English interpreter, who also serves as the board chair of the Mind and Life Institute. So I am so looking forward to this dialogue. It's really great to be with you, Your Holiness. And now I'll turn it over to Professor John Dunne to share his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Susan. Your Holiness, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you here today. This is one of many dialogues in a whole series from the Mind and Life Institute. And as with many people who are watching, I think, I've personally learned a great deal from these dialogues, from this interaction between Western science and Buddhist science and Buddhist approach to mental training. But in some ways, this dialogue especially, I think, is really one that can have a very direct impact. As we said in the title, we refer to times of crisis. So many people around the world are experiencing their lives with a kind of crisis because of the pandemic, because of climate change, conflicts. And we know that this is having a real impact on mental health and on wellness. It's really fortunate that we have two distinguished professors, researchers, who have explored these issues in such depth and who will ask a series of questions of you, Your Holiness, to try to help us to understand what's our best way forward, and also what can we actually concretely do. So with all that in mind, I'd like to now turn it over to Professor Alyssa Epple, who's going to ask you her first question. Alyssa.
Thank you, John. Your Holiness, it is an honor and a privilege to speak with you, especially today. Today we have this long shadow of COVID still, and a longer shadow of the climate crisis. And these shed a dark shadow on our mental health. Mental health globally was already not great, but in the last year, there has been 120 million additional people developing depression or anxiety. So we are all concerned about well-being, and especially of our youth. This constant stress of uncertainty, an uncertain future, creates anxiety. So uncertainty comes first, and it makes us feel unsafe and threatened. So in our research, we have followed people this year through the pandemic and measured comfort with uncertainty. For example, we ask, can you relax even though you don't know what tomorrow will be like? What we've found, as predicted, is that people with comfort of uncertainty have much less traumatic and repetitive thoughts about COVID and also about climate. So this comfort with uncertainty is very important. We want a predictable future, but that's not our reality. Uncertainty is always here. Uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety shapes our emotional well-being and our physical health. So, Your Holiness, my first question to you is this: how can we become more comfortable with uncertainty, this uncertain future we have?
이때 매번 내주디 토네 매만 부시부지를 강에 태도스 아니 이때 매번 막 수디고 춘이자 여다 비오만 와서 이 토래야 이 토네 셈삽다 셈제 숙침부 망한다 숙침부 망해야 탑람 탑시를 가려놨어.
Indeed, I am very, very happy and great honor this opportunity through videotape discuss with my friends. So now, uncertainty basically, as Buddhists believe, things always changing and the future unpredictable. That's quite nature. But now, the unfortunate thing is the problem which we are facing, some by nature, including weather condition. These are something part of nature. But meantime, a lot of problem is our own creation. I think, frankly speaking, among so many different species of mammals, other mammal, even tiger, lion, these are meat eater, but without certain reason, they won't attack one another. But we human beings, because of our discontentment, and sometimes I think unnecessary suspicion, and mainly I feel due to narrow-minded. So a lot of problem which here on this world face last several centuries, and within this century, you see, First World War, Second World War, and spent a lot of money making weapons. These are, see, we have, I think, basically against basic nature. Look, tiger, lion, since they are meat eater, on attack some other animal, but our human beings' teeth sometimes we can sort of bite fish. Otherwise, you see, basic human physical condition, physical nature is not that kind of tigers or these things. So we basically, judging our face, we are more peaceful nature. And then our sort of peace. Now time passes, use our intelligence, we can develop inner peace, stronger. That is the best way to keep one individual peaceful life. And community level, peaceful community. Now furthermore, we human beings, we can really develop peaceful world. There's no question. Use basic human nature, more compassionate, and then wisdom, thinking, wider perspective. Then we really have the opportunity to create peaceful, happy world. Past is past. In the past, we too much thinking, my community, my nation. Now today, according to reality, we have to think about the world, about the humanity. I think this thinking, me personally also, very helpful after we become refugee, remain in this country. And of course, historically, we Tibetan and Indian, we have some special connection. Plus, India, peaceful, and as far as religion is concerned, multi-religion exists in this country. So, sometimes I feel I prefer India as a refugee rather than stay in Podala on a high throne. You see, some sort of way of life is unrealistic, too much official thinking. Now become refugee. I feel much happier, much happier. So now all these, basically we are same human being. We have to live together on this planet. And me personally, meantime, you see, with India's freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, I can utilize much also my thinking, which if I stay in Tibet, more formal way and difficult. Now as a refugee, me is much easier to share with our, different views. And now, really possible thinking about peaceful world. At least now, this century and the coming centuries, we really can build peaceful world, happy humanity on the concept of oneness of 7 billion human beings. And we must feel fed up when we saw weapons, soldiers. We really feel, is it necessary? No. We have to think oneness of 7 billion human beings and one world, one world. We have to live together. So now, I think now situation is such now we can really develop peaceful world with concept of oneness of 7 billion human beings. And thinking basic human emotion from birth, we are received maximum affection from our mother. So that's our life start. So if from the birth we remain like this, And then, you see, difficult to also change that. But our nature, more compassionate. Without that, the child cannot survive. Every human being, all come from childhood experience. So now, I think in the recent centuries, fightings, killing, these are, superficial thinking, not based on, the ultimate reality. So now, since things become, I think we humanity, compelled to think about reality and thinking one world. So, there is real potential. We human being, warm-heartedness, and sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, from the childhood. Now, I feel some sort of we are lacking practice is once we join school, education, never taught or never say peace of mind. We only concern about our intelligence. And through that way, in modern society, too much competition. Firstly, even within the family, brothers, sisters, at a very young age, is more compassionate. Then brothers, sisters getting older, and within our own family member, some sense of competition come. So these, I think, mainly artificial thinking and pattern of the world, too much competition. Their life with too much competition. You see, this not very nature of humanity, but a negative emotion, and due to lacking in our education. So education, now we should pay more attention about how to keep peaceful world not come from sky, but we each individual, 7 billion human beings, we must build peaceful world in order to develop or in order to bring peaceful world, not by weapon, but by warm-heartedness. And you see, recognize entire 7 billion are human brothers, sisters. We have to live together, and much better, more compassionate, rather than competition and paying more attention to weapon. So I think sometimes I feel world, due to a lot of problems, a lot of suffering in the past, now we become more or less more mature human being. So there is a real sort of basis for hope, make peaceful with sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, and basically oneness of 7 billion human beings. I think within our lifetime, I think we can build really peaceful, happy world. Okay.
Your Holiness, there's so much that is of profound importance here. And I especially, one of the things that I really appreciate about these dialogues is that even when we are speaking about something challenging and difficult, we also find time for smile, for laughter even in the middle of these challenging times. It's something I've always appreciated about being with you in Mind and Life dialogues. And you've also mentioned peace, the importance of peace for individuals. So as we are working toward this idea of the oneness of humanity, our common humanity, individuals also find themselves very, very challenged. And so with that in mind, I'd like to turn now to Professor Shiota and ask her to share a little bit about the kind of work she's been doing for cultivating joy and inner peace. And she has a question for you in this area. Lani?
Thank you so much, John. And thank you, Your Holiness, for the opportunity to talk with you today. This is truly an honor and a joy. So as my friend and colleague, Dr. Epple, shared, and as Dr. Dunne has mentioned, many people are deeply, deeply distressed at this point in time. They are suffering. They feel hopeless. They are not sure that there is a world ahead that they wish to live in, and they are struggling with the fear and the anger and the sadness that many people are facing now. Many people are seeking guidance on how they can reduce their suffering at this time while also working to improve the state of the world. So I would like to ask you about techniques people can use to achieve this. In my field, in research on emotion regulation, we have consistently found that certain approaches are associated with higher well-being. So, for example, last summer, my students and I conducted a study in the United States where we asked people to describe the specific techniques that they used to manage their emotions during the pandemic. And we found that a set of strategies that involve finding joy in everyday life were associated with lower depression, lower anxiety, and lower stress. And these included techniques such as focusing one's thoughts on positive aspects, even of difficult situations. We call that positive reappraisal. It can include taking time to mindfully enjoy a pleasant activity, the sight of a beautiful tree, the scent of a candle, a period of dance, something that brings you joy. Some people can find humor and laughter to be helpful even in moments of pain and fear. It seems to me that these techniques are beneficial because they create space for a bit of joy in everyday life, even during hard times. But many people feel that this is unrealistic, that experiencing peace or joy can only happen if you deny the difficulties we are facing, if you ignore how hard things actually are. So, Your Holiness, my question for you is this. During these times of crisis, how can more people learn to make space for joy and inner peace while also recognizing the magnitude of the problems our world is facing?
Now, as I already mentioned, according to reality, the world becomes smaller and smaller. And on top of that, the climate condition, all these force us think about oneness of one world, one humanity. Now, instead of competition or cheating, work together, because we have to live together. And you see, with sense of self-centered attitude and spent a lot of money for weapon and killing. That's, you see, in the past, you see, we people spent a lot of money for weapon, for military forces. Result, more suffering, more problem. So thinking this reality, then there is no other alternative. We have to live together without a weapon, helping each other. Now, for that reason, firstly, we really need anger, no use. Anger brings us fear. Fear brings and violence. So now we should pay more attention about our inner peace. Not just by faith, but through reason. As I already mentioned, we 7 billion human beings, actually our brothers, sisters, and different color, different sort of, what's the country, but basically we are same. I think one simple reason, you see, there are a lot of marriage without thinking color or different sort of what's the races, even different religion. So this shows oneness of we human being. As I already mentioned, you see, after I came as a refugee, I really feel we are same. No special reason to worry since I lost my own country. But since you see, we not seeking complete separation, we willing remain within the People's Republic of China. I am thinking more sort of universal thinking, not just we Tibetan. If we too much sort of emphasis or individual case, then within Tibetan come Amdo Yuzhang, within there different sort of say, groups. So now we should feel enough, too much emphasis on individual group. Now time come, we have to think about world, humanity. As I already mentioned, I myself, thinking that way, I really get much more peace. When I visit different countries, I always feel we are same. So, that I think we really put more emphasis oneness of 7 billion human beings and one world we have to live together.
This importance of the oneness of humanity. Yes.
So then, my own sort of practice, as soon as wake up, I always thinking, I'm human being, live on this planet, we are same. So here, the practice of the bodhicitta, very helpful. We never make a distinction, they and we. We always think entire sentient being and particularly entire human being. So thinking benefit of entire human being, more altruistic thinking. And now here, I think today's Jimala, I think, can translate Dr. Shenji Dunne da kasa yanda sawa machana and sosu kiba yung mares chasa enta kada kasure kada rangdun samne adi and kasure te ini kada mukiba yung agi ken diris rangdun kasa shandun samya de ngone de digi yong ya risha ganzu mi jizol tani degu yari mi zam mai be simja samolo kada ganzu tensa shadoga sa de yin de shandun samba tai chu rangdun kona samdana 무기부 용대야 지기 차되기도가 그래서 닥대생이 동네다 양도사와 권는데 양도사 마셔나 아니 디기야 요 말이스 나한테 인다르 상등기요래 닥대생이 동네 양도사 마셔나 아니 가서 양도사 마셔나
상제니도 믿어보지.
상제니도 믿으시. 아니. 가.
코나야. 코나야 되었네.
자사가 디지인도 간다 지 랑드 용 주야 약수디 현든 삼나. 그러다 디 아니 섬르지 피기도가 어당아디 장주 섬사도 상당지 연두전에 배 섬의 시디 그 시우지 용되기도.
In my own daily practice, one of the things that I find most helpful is cultivating this altruistic outlook. So every morning when I get up, I remind myself that I'm just one human being among many human beings. We're all the same. And particularly reflecting upon some of the passages from this Indian master, Shantideva, who talks about how at the root of many of the problems we face in our everyday life is actually sometimes excessive self-focus and self-centeredness. And at the root of many of the things that are good in our life actually tends to be rooted in an attitude that has more other orientation. And in fact, Shantideva says that, for a Buddhist, let alone attaining Buddhahood, if you are focused too much on yourself, even in this life, in the everyday world, you wouldn't find joy. So this recognition that, orientation more towards others is really the gateway to greater joy is something that I really find very, very meaningful and true in my own personal life as well. So the main point is that if one is truly serious about one's own long-term well-being, one needs to open up one's heart and orient more towards others so that there's space for others and it's not just focus on oneself.
세상아 다 수수랑도 주고 삼다나 에디 그직 잠시고 몽구지 다 가수래 통대하르지 샹드섬 지성 그 샹드걸로 기베 저기 랑게 성의 시디 정식이 용대하지 랑게 랑게 용대하지 세트제 인도 가르랑게 냠뇨지 쉐베이나 벤리신도 샤가 야라보다 자주가 성공 엔디 갑된들이야 땡중 그 대권은 있어야 돼 랑게 디기디 샹을 땡데 여러와 자 드리 인도자네 얘네 편주 뚜뚜 때에 따와서 디삼루지 코 데드 첩시 간다 랑게 때와디 셴 때워 주나 라이 때워야 그 편주 뚜뚜 셴이 되는 지 서드리 산제베 숑네 에네 땡지 뚜뚜 셴 셰대야 되기 알다데 디슈리 핑크도 개들랑게 천이 된요는 들러 꾸베 ngo부지 비칠 동니 ngo부지 비규주는 던지심이 되신 거예요. 강신 ngo부대다 남자는 뒤에 딱전 걸 수르도 내니 뭐이 디시직 된기 타냐자라 나버셔면서 뒤니 그 소식과 건식이 다다셔다 겨와지고 그래서 타냐도냐지고 최 겨한 거 이번주 도스 상당히 전에 쉬우지도 와. 에네 가다한데 디 나라즈 미사데 지소식을 땡땡이 지리 사데리 인도 랑기 디기디 샹다 땡땡이 지기 디 서비스타르샤 사데리 인도 샹라 사와차디 랑기 디기 용야기 응원에베 마사로 소드르디샤 사도선에 상당히 전에 에네 가다 나나나샤 지고 소수지고 상당하고 정신기 숙충조 돼야 지기 마겐섬제 탐제스네 디그 시우지다 반도 용도가 어떤지 저자가 자주스음 고면스게디 somebody 샹든 somebody 용야디 랑든 주야 약슈디 전죽성 고면이셔.
So, in fact, if you sort of dig deeper into the psychology of self-orientation versus orientation towards others, we will come to recognize that often underlying many of the fear and stress and also suspicion that we hold tends to be actually too much excessively focused around self. So when we invest too much of ourselves into a situation, we tend to see things in a disproportionate way. So on the other hand, if we are able to open up our heart a little bit and be more orienting towards others, in fact, the fact that we make that choice opens up a space for courage in us. And we also tend to be more relaxed. So this is one of the reasons why there's an emphasis in Buddhist tradition on cultivating more altruistic orientation of the mind. And we call it bodhicitta, awakening mind, altruistic awakening mind. And this is a practice I do in the morning. And so as a Buddhist, then we combine this practice of cultivation of the, altruistic orientation by grounding it in a more philosophical worldview. which incorporates the appreciation of interconnectedness and interdependence. The fact that even in reality, from the point of view of understanding reality, if we are able to appreciate that our own well-being is not just independent, discrete reality, it is intertwined with the well-being of others. And if we are able to appreciate that kind of deep interconnectedness, interdependence, then we will also learn to take joy in other people's well-being as well. Because, you know, when we help other people, in the process, we also help ourselves. So if, and here at the deeper philosophical level, of course, the Buddhist view of interdependence is rooted in the Madhyamaka philosophy of emptiness, which actually rejects any notion of objective independent reality. Everything is interconnected, everything is relational. And here, His Holiness cited key passages from the 7th century Chandrakirti's text, Entering the Middle Way, where he really goes through argument by argument, demonstrating how the idea of an objective independent reality out there is untenable, by demonstrating consequences for this position. So the main point is, if we are able to adopt this kind of view, then we have a much more kind of expansive view of reality, where our perception of the self and other relationship is much more constructive and also closer to reality, one could argue. And even if someone is very interested in pursuing one's own personal well-being, the smarter strategy is to actually, pay attention to and care more about others. Because there's a saying that by focusing on others' well-being, achievement of your own well-being comes as a byproduct. It's not something that you have to deliberately seek out. So those are things which really help, because if you contemplate on them, if you try to embody them, if you try to cultivate them in your own mind, it really makes a difference.
인가 인다르 자주섬 탑지산에 자주섬 다신냠지도 조 상다. 다디 갑된이야 개들한게 생이 땡겨나 텔럭구르 고부지비실 동이 고부지비 교교는 된지비 되신거예요. 건신 고부되다 남자나 tin이 딱제 뭐를 추르도 나님이 티시직된게 타냐다라 나버 재매자 tin이 거수고 건시게 다다전에 겨워르면 뭐 저기 타냐더냐 그러면 최이 겨한 거 이거죠. 다디 슈데 고부 동보소니 라서 뭐 솔로더나 맞아봐야면 지더되는 소년 소동의 시버대에 나머 제주도 티신 고부담저 동나야 돈이 다르도 겨wan주로서 자디도 상무스타인들잖아요. 지금 셰단스야디 지금 그게 밑에 자서로 직배 랑서로 상담 등도가 다디 디식이 구도가 시우지 판도도 아니 자서가 한다 아더 쉽게 나라야 그래서 가 르르르원 지신도 띠무꾼을 내줘디 대신 연모 탐자 이제 띠무 좀be 좀번줄 댄신 저번 중앙과 통는 띠무 중민줄 대신 배바고 이제 땀도 통만 예버셔스 제한테 띵중그 대코는 이제 상담다네 디치도 나다 최선의 시부지기 지금 랑세버를 써버려 된저게 상로대 그 가다 탑지산에 자주고 상담다 시르고 산에 동리가 상담다 띵주고 대코는 이제 상담다데 시부지 팽크도 상려야.
So in my own personal practice, when I focus on cultivating the altruistic orientation that I spoke of, bodhicitta, I tend to use more the Shantideva approach of equalizing and exchanging self and others. And as I mentioned before, it's really powerful. And then as a sort of a rationale and support for this, we need philosophical grounding and dependent origination that I spoke about. And here, one of the key ideas is the recognition that the notion of an objective independent existing out there is untenable. So, and finding a way in which you actually, Chandrakirti talks about how, having recognized that objective independent existence is untenable, yet at the same time, we should not slide into nihilism by saying nothing matters, nothing exists. So we need to be able to find a robust conception of reality, which is relational. And in some ways, it's like almost like a sort of an illusion-like character where things seems to be have an objective existence, but actually they do not. And their existence can only be spoken in terms of relationality or interdependence. And this kind of view is actually, I personally find it very helpful because, you know, what it does is, in some sense, it sort of undermines our assumptions about, you know, separateness. For example, like us and them, we and you, kind of, you know, you and me. And all of these assumptions are underpinned by kind of a belief in some kind of real separability, which is grounded in objective facts of the world. But when you bring this kind of philosophical perspective, as well as the more ethical side of, you know, altruistic cultivation, then really this very strong attachment and clinging to me, I, and us tends to sort of dissolve. And it really has an impact, you know, so there's a sort of a two aspects to this. One is the more ethical cultivation of the orientation of the heart through the altruistic cultivation. The other one is more from the philosophical approach where you cultivate an outlook on the world, you know, a kind of understanding of reality. And that really seemed to make a difference.
Your Holiness, I was wondering if we might, this is such an excellent point to transition to another question that we have for you, which I think is in many ways related to this, the insight of the interdependence of our lives and the way in which altruism, not being self-focused, can actually help us is very powerful. But sometimes people get caught in a state of feeling hopeless, of feeling like there's no future for themselves. And so with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Professor Epple again and ask her to ask our third question. Alyssa?
Thank you, John. This is so rich. I study longevity and telomeres, and I work with Nobel laureate Elizabeth Blackburn, who you've met. And it's just such exciting science to understand how the mind shapes our health and our aging. And we now know that loving kindness meditation is stabilizing telomeres. It's very good for our aging. But I just can't talk about longevity today. We have to talk about the Earth's health, which we are completely dependent upon. So a new survey came out, the first survey ever of youth across the world, 10 countries. And they were asked, how are you feeling about your outlook about the world and the climate crisis? And we just must look at these numbers together. 75% of young people, teens and young adults, feel the future is frightening. 75%, this is an overwhelming result. The researchers were devastated by their findings. 56%, more than half of these 10,000 youth feel that humanity is doomed. Now we know that hope is, and hopeful action is our lifeline. It's so important. So, Your Holiness, my question is this: how can we continue to adopt a positive outlook and maintain hope today with this, so many worried about the future of our planet?
Shiota, sablu busu togu cheche dus dewe yena, chigi zhama shiwaru mungu shiwu ji tongdaya chigi. Sata de, ngen namju takwa di, chigdi maa tuanshe, ngara gombi jegi yu. Tezalo zhi sege nawa sejene, ranga lana nebe gyuru rashindu, sisum jeda moli dene gewe bar, dode tanya tempe doki gogol zho. Ngati godin jidi buji tawya ge rao gegi yorda. 다도 고버도 삼대 이미지 저금에 벌어 이장 깨어시 대고듯이 수지상계 드전이 멀리 보나로에 파버시 왕인스 다 장주서도 돈이 다와님도 송두전에 그저들이 쇼양가고 대교와 낭배계고 되는 교 낭배이 누두단에 게을른 그 수도기 개회연대 자수 파를 초동조 신 근데 직지디 딱 왔던데 가 말레디 지 그 아데 디 그저 자주고서 단도 자주고서 그 멍십시 다 이해되버지 다데도스 야르게다네 다샤 샤보 송데는 신세네 에네 산지지 수고 담보다 치고 담보 주야기 어디 심슈시 기도가 에네 스름르처럼 상당거로 자자가 디인도 안데 측시 되기 섬나려 시우지기 저래야다 닝도래야 백해셔도 디단에 에네 주주도 사들 치스 난가 내와던 저치스 내겨 티스 단에 내겨는 저동에 서울쇼 세네 다 디디기 시우직 섬래야 뽑아다 아니 지금 선보 상고용야를 시우직 해봐도
So what is really required alongside hope is really a focus on cultivating courage. The problem with losing hope is sometimes when we see problem, our mind tend to lock on to the problem. And when we are too oriented by problem alone, then actually we see many problems everywhere. So of course, problem is there, but you need to adopt a mindset, an outlook that does not get just fixated on the problem, so that to the point where it leaves no space for hope and courage. So and the courage is key. And here His Holiness cited some of the passages. As a Buddhist, one of the primary aspirations is to, tread on the path to enlightenment. And and part of the path that's a long path. We're talking about, cultivating bodhicitta to an optimal level, cultivating the wisdom of emptiness to an optimal level, and combining these two, wisdom and compassion, compared to like two wings of a great bird, which will then help someone soar high into the space of reality and travel beyond to the shores of Buddhahood. So that's the aspiration as a Buddhist one has. And if you think about what the objective and the goal here is, it's an ambitious goal. But by recognizing that the basis for all of this is found in me, right here, and I can do it, I can cultivate it, and also recognizing some of the progress that you make already along the path, it gives you more hope and more courage and more confidence. So I think there are definitely things we can learn from this kind of basic psychology of the need to bring courage as well as confidence to, as an underpinning for hope. So that, so here, a couple of things that's happening. One is to open up so that your mind is not fixated on the problem alone.
Yes.
And then you need a sense of courage, thinking that I can do something. And then along with that, also needs to have a sense of confidence based on a long view. So those are things which help me in my own kind of journey. And this is something that could also have a sort of a general lesson here.
Thank you, Your Holiness. It's really profound to think about the way in which wisdom and compassion are something that, in a sense, we have within ourselves, like we have a fundamental capacity for this. It's really remarkable in a way, the capacities that we have as humans. But also, as you know, there are many thousands of people watching us now. And with that wisdom and compassion, one question, of course, well, what do we do next in a practical way? what kinds of actions should we take? So with that in mind, I'm going to again ask Professor Epple to ask our question. We're going to jump over a couple of questions and go to question number 6 now.
I ask a question many of us have, and this is about wise action. Our crises open the door for large societal change. And at times I think I'm so lucky to be alive at this moment on this planet in such dire need, because we have the opportunity to live the most purposeful life. Our actions can have huge effects on future generations to try to help them exist or have a better life. But we may not change enough, and that we don't know if our actions together will happen soon enough. And so this plagues us with doubt. But if we truly believe that our actions together matter, if we truly believe in the oneness of humanity, and we adopt that in our actions, this opens the opportunity for huge transformational changes. We know from research that we don't have to change everyone. Small group of people with strong moral values, uniting their hearts, minds, and action, can lead social movements, can create big change. And so this is called a social tipping point. I hope that we are near a social tipping point together. We know, Your Holiness, that you work very hard, teaching, writing op-eds and books, and every day renewing your vow of the Bodhisattva. And we are here because you inspire us, and we want to engage in wise action as well. And so, Your Holiness, my question is this: what would you like to say to the thousands of us with you right now from all over the globe that encourages practical action to make the world a better place?
가서 산재인의 메토죠 코아다야 대화 메스 현도조 자식이 지금 서버 상고시 매나 산재지 고와 토야다 가와이에데 미스텔이니 기부야멘도스 다들 현재 등에다 야다죠 마셔도 산재인도 메토죠 코아나야 대화 대외 경에 그세 전주심께 따셔네 대내 대화를 하라 심시 수시 길루주스 디 시부지 심시 계할 패시울 팽기도가 나티 책디니 나를 시던데기 저상아 슬립이 보고 절부시다 보이지버리 제니 다 전주 웃음다 돈이 다 삼루수스탄에서네 그 절부시 보이지버디기 샴진시메다 사버지 자연구도
So I mean, in my own case, as I mentioned before, what gives me a lot of strength and courage and confidence is continual renewal of the altruistic orientation of the heart. And as I cited before from Shantideva, who, these are verses that I chant regularly and, reflect deeply on them. Shantideva says that if one does not switch self and others, let alone attainment of Buddhahood, even in this life, there is no real, source of joy. Therefore, what wise person, intelligent person wouldn't embark on a journey where one is able to move from a place of joy to joy by mounting this horse of altruistic intention. So this, for me personally, contemplating on these verses, thinking about them, renewing my altruistic orientation really helps. So what we need is on the part of each individual, some way of finding that kind of renewal of their intention, their courage, and their confidence. And for me, of course, a large part of that comes from sources like the Shantideva's text and contemplation on the teaching on philosophy of emptiness. So this union of method and wisdom. And I sometimes, brag that I was born in the same region as the great Tsongkhapa. He was also from Amdo. I'm from Amdo. So it looks like, judging by what I have been able to do, at least in my personal practice, so far, I don't seem to be dragging down Tsongkhapa's name by saying we were born in the same region.
Well, thank you, Your Holiness. It's certainly powerful to invoke the name of Jay Rinpoche when we're talking about wisdom and compassion. No question about it. We have one last question for you, actually, Your Holiness. And this question is a little different. It's actually a question that's kind of really, in a sense, for scientists. But before saying more, I'm just going to turn it over to Professor Shiota. Lani, would you go ahead and please ask our last question, number 7.
Thank you, John. So, Your Holiness, during an early Mind and Life event many years ago, psychology researchers asked for your advice on what they should study. Your response was that they should do research on mental training, on how it affects the mind and the brain. Your advice has led to a great deal of research on mindfulness and compassion practices, giving rise to a large body of what is today called contemplative science. Your Holiness, my question for you is, how would you answer this question now, in 2021? What do you think those of us who study the mind and behavior, psychologists, neuroscientists, and clinical scientists, should be studying next?
Shiota, and Samkham Ripoti, Takaranga, Kongen Shebada, Yilu, Yijinam Shichani. Dan the Chanju and the Tony Tawas Leti, Yilu, Yilukan Tukuyorba, Kongen Sheba Marbata, Chasangada, Kongen Shebe, Chilo Nizu Tong de Ardi, Tell Taking Chani, Somebody Godu Soya Didi, Yilutin Yukuyorba. Da Chasanga. The Kanda Sem Joya di Yilu Namsha di Yago Shivache. So that Delia and the Chenribu, Leve Chenribu did in Yamdolanga Kistos, Yondeg Yori. Sata and the Kongen Shiva Mayimbe, Yilu Dodandi, Lebadan Draw Countries Yeteme, or the Digitane, any da Kandachi. Leve Giotane or Samcom Ripon Giodra, Kauridi, Yene Ongushivada, Yi Namshik Drodan to Teddy, Leve change with the Dinam Kuduche, Jenny, da Kanda change were Samcom Ripon call or Tona Young at the Teddy, da Samcom Ripon call ya. And Tonachi Yunduzane, da Chir Sanjevic, Yangu, Ada Nalanda, Kawanzu, or Kashuri. She looms on gives Chua Mayimba. Rigbelam that was Dachashani. Kanda, Bena, Luju Shung, the Shashana, Umasawashiro Sambe, the Zunalo, Ripukore, Drub the Bashmato, Lungi Drubji, Shiraminduka, and the Chamden de Lungdini, go Lundun Shani, Kapacha Guadende, Yonde Dua, so Ribolo so then they are chigi. That day, she Samcom report the Jenny, those as a Samatala, then they Pandotu.
So when we talk about mental training, one very fundamental distinction we need to make from an epistemological perspective is the difference between what in the Buddhist literature or Indian philosophical literature we talk about sensory experiences on the one hand and mental experiences on the other. Of course, we know from personal experience that many of even the mental experiences are led by sensory experiences. The things that we see, hear, and come into contact, then they give rise to sensations and feelings and thoughts and emotions and so on. But the fact remains still that these modalities are different, and the experience of unhappiness and happiness takes place at the level of the mind, not at the level of the senses. So when we are talking about mental training, such as cultivation of the altruistic orientation of the mind, as well as wisdom of emptiness and all of this, we're really talking at the level of the mind, not at the level of the senses. So because of this, I've had quite a lot of discussions with neuroscientists in trying to see if there are any ways in which correlations of the mental level experiences can be mapped out at the brain level, just as the sensory experiences are mapped out at the brain level. So that's an interesting discussion. And another important thing is that when it comes to understanding the nature of mind and functions of various facets of the mind, Buddhist tradition in general, and particularly the Nalanda tradition, is very rich in resources. And one of the remarkable features of the Nalanda tradition is, although it is a Buddhist tradition, it's a tradition that does not prioritize the authority of the scripture. So, for example, if you look at the great masters like Nagarjuna's, fundamental treatise on the middle way, there's very little scriptural authority being cited. It's really a series of arguments and rational arguments and reasoning. And in fact, in some cases, masters like Nagarjuna would interpret a literal meaning of go beyond the literal meaning of a particular statement attributed to the Buddha, and just not accept it at the face value, so the reason is prioritized. So I think it would be wonderful if there is a way in which there could be a deep collaborative research where this, the reason-based approach that is found in the Nalanda, as well as the resources that are presented in the domain of mind science from the Nalanda tradition, could be somehow, combined, not combined, but come into a dialogue and collaborative research with modern researchers, scientists, so that there could be a more kind of richer conversation. That's one possible kind of area of work that could be done.
Tini Shesin Samu Jigrun din Mongom Yili Kyoye, Never Tokun din Sanjashan, Shangitu, Chuminjuru, Sene, Nede Yin, the Choja Lambo, the Choja Tabadi, Denjung Tekonani, then a taxam said the Tulu Chu or Maris, the Tulu Moshurni, and the Pangsam take out of Maos.
So, and of course, the Nalanda tradition is not a monolithic tradition. It's very pluralistic. And so, for example, like the great thinker Chandrakirti, even, takes masters like Dignag and Dharmakirti and others as object of criticism, and pointing out that even these great masters still, retain some vestiges of clinging to a notion of objectivity, and saying that they haven't realized the full truth. So it's a very pluralistic world with a lot of diverse perspective, but all emphasizing the centrality of the reasoning.
So that's a time Kudulia, Shezumbe Shesin, Lunge Tambina, and Kudur Mishamu Piche, the Kusha Chorwa. A nation, and a seminalolia, ene chabo mo chung se adi chain gudu
Buddhist was saying that this said, this statement about the centrality of reasoning, but in actual practice, in the monastic debating courtyards, when someone is sitting down, another person is, opening a line of attack or a questioning, and then when the person cites an authority of a scripture, a great master's statement, there's a difference, at least accorded by taking the hat off. so in practice, it doesn't happen completely all the time. Yeah.
Your Holiness, I would love to see us do a little debate, but we are running a little low on time. So I was told, however, that we do have time for 2 more questions. I think pretty short questions. So with that in mind, actually, I'd like to now turn it to, and for our translators, I'll say, this is question number 4 in our list of questions. I'd love to turn it now over to Professor Shiota again. I think this is a really interesting question, Your Holiness, that you'll be able to give us a great answer to. Lonnie?
Thank you, John. So this is a hard question, and it is one many of us are facing right now. Your Holiness, you mentioned the importance of common humanity. But right now, one of the challenges that we face is how divided we feel from each other. We have different worldviews. We have different beliefs about the pandemic, about climate change, about how people should behave toward each other. And we may perceive that those who believe and act differently are doing tremendous harm. These perceptions lead to destructive fear and anger. I have very dear friends, good people, who are terrified. They are frightened for themselves. They are frightened for their children. They are frightened for their communities. They are frightened for humanity and for our future, and they are angry. They want to argue and fight with people who disagree with them, and they want to try to convince those others that they are wrong. Research in my field of social psychology shows that this does not work. It never works. If anything, arguing with people, trying to convince them that you are right and they are wrong, usually pushes them to even more extreme beliefs than they initially held. So, Your Holiness, I have a 2-part question for you. First, by what mental process or technique can we generate compassion, loving kindness, and a feeling of one humanity toward those people we believe are causing damage in the world? And second, how can we talk with those people in a way that will be constructive rather than destructive?
Dida anda zamuli di galia chegi kasore be migyang tundun che eni migdu kora chegi semgi shiti kol shake shegi yamar bata chasaga anzo anda tagi mashke shung samchu anzo lobsan nalia chegi bugchunju gala chegi chamni jisadi sha 개초부 저기 요래 에 가서 랍자 나도 슈두잖아 에 잠즈사디 걸 생에 김도고 더 잠즈사디 추게지 개 말이 미심 기부서야 심 흘려야 심 흘려주나 안즈 인텔리전스 지기 최로 남지기 싫어디디 심 흘려주나 야우지 가게 도그러 심 부수도고체 sem 추다나 최로 남지기 싫어기 그게 가서 우리 냠십지하고야 연금도 가 사들이 인도 잠닝지사디 겨우것이 계속해 말에 미스다갈이야 간다지 sem을 시디 주야지다 sem그 시디 좋나 에 나서 레버디 배수 야우시 해야지.
So one of the big problem that we humans face is that often when we look at situations, we tend to get so caught up in a view of reality that is very short term, very immediate, and very obvious. we don't open up to be able to see beyond certain things that we see. So, and for this, one of the things that is really most helpful is finding on the part of individuals ourselves, a way to first relax our mind so that we have a deeper kind of sense of peace within us. And that's one of the reasons why I often emphasize that we need to focus more on the younger generation, the new generation, so that we can teach some of these skills from a very early age. Because children, when they are very small, consideration of others, compassion, loving kindness come quite natural. It's because they are very strong social emotions. They come naturally. But as we grow up through education, formal education, often we sort of extract these out of the children. So then, we lose touch with what is very natural, basic to us. So I think this is key. So the point here is that on our part, individually, we need to find a way to create that sense of space in us where there is a peace, where there is a more relaxed state of mind. Because if we don't have that, then our mind becomes very anxious and very restless. And with an anxious and restless mind, then we are not able to use even our intellect properly. So even if we may have a very good rational argument, but if our mind is disturbed, we are not in a position to, first of all, think through clearly, and secondly, to be able to articulate them. So one suggestion I have is to really kind of first work at this cultivation of a deeper sense of peace oneself.
Thank you, Your Holiness. We've been speaking a lot about small actions actually that we can take. This also raises the question of a sense of that confidence that you were speaking about, our own personal confidence. Sometimes we can have doubts about whether we are really making a difference in the world. With that in mind, I'm going to ask Professor Shiota to ask, this is actually our last question. I'm going to ask Lani to ask this final question. Lani?
Your Holiness, thank you so much for this wonderful evening. I have one more question for you, which is, can you help us and those who are listening tonight, the thousands of people who are listening tonight, to understand how our small acts of kindness and compassion can matter, even when we face problems as vast as the coronavirus pandemic, climate change, and war?
죄송하다. 지금 선거 상부셔는 지금 강의 체배 그들이 그 동련시하되 숙체 시도로 지금 선거 공조해야 돼. 암자십시 대비는 지 경의 체배에는 심 shum돼야지 모두 영향을 두고 서다 간다 만주 밀이야 추루도 남지기 싫어야지 예배 인도산에 대영어래야 심 시디디 쉬우지 개셔 버리셔 심 시디야 그 자월어디 선거 상고셔야 되기 심 시디야 그 자월어 차대요래 어또 누구세나 거라 커도다가 심 시디지고 샤면 두고 꼭 간단 가란서 저기 되기를 쉬어야다 지금 이긴 넘버 10을 지금 그 가서 그래 누구로 찾아서 떠나려야 심 시디고야 돼 개셔 버리셔.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, one of the most important things on the part of us as individuals is to really focus on, as much as possible, trying to bring more compassion as part of our everyday intention. Because if we are able to bring compassion as part of our intention, and then it also creates more courage in us, and also we're in a better position to even deal with challenges and difficulties because there is a greater courage. Whereas if we give in to fear, anxiety, and so on, then, even when we are confronting a challenge, we are not in a position to actually fully utilize the resources that we have been gifted as human beings with the ability to rationally think through. So, so what this suggests is that even for us to exercise our rational faculty, some degree of a settled mind, a peace of mind, is needed. And there is nothing more powerful than cultivating a more compassionate intention as a way of creating that, the peace. Because it's difficult to say that there is this thing that you can do to have that kind of intention. It's a sort of a, it needs a more broader approach, the way you see the world, the way you see yourself, the way in which you view your relationship with others, the way in which you view others. And in this kind of more broad-based approach, then things will change. So it's difficult to say you can do this as if there is only one thing.
Okay.
Your Holiness, thank you very much for what has been a really tremendously powerful dialogue. I'm sure that the audience joins me in appreciating everything that we've managed to cover tonight. So much more to say. But now we'd like to ask our two scientists to share a few final thoughts that will focus actually on their own views of concrete action. And I'd like to begin with Professor Epple. Alyssa?
Thank you, John. We see the importance of joy and of finding both inner joy and noticing the good things that are around, right? So that the news brings us to think that people have terrible behavior during COVID. And the fact is, the most common behavior is kindness, is helping others. We just don't find that on the news. So we have been so inspired by the documentary of Mission Joy, showing His Holiness with his friend, Archbishop Tutu. And what you see and hear is tremendous, lives of tremendous purpose despite adversity, laughter. And so with Peggy Callahan, the documentary group, documentarian, and a group of researchers, we've created a platform to study joy, to give people practices so they can find the subtle joy in each day, doing an act of kindness, gratitude, noticing nature, the beauty and wonder. And so we would love people to try it, and we will learn from it. And our biggest goal is just to spread joy. So this can be found on the Mind and Life website.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. And finally, Professor Shiota, Lani, will you share your final thoughts?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. I got 3 things. Thing 1, make room for joy. And joy is restorative. It is not passive. It is not my well-being alone that matters. Taking time to savor what is good in life builds our strength and reminds us there is actually something worth fighting for. This is the opposite of despair. Number 2, go do something. Go make yourself useful. Constructive action aimed at improving the situation, even if it is small, local action, has the double benefit, as His Holiness shared with us earlier, of making a difference in the world and also helping us to feel okay. Constructive action can help stabilize your own situation, but we have all encouraged moving forward to spread those benefits out into the world as well, because none of us can solve the problems that we face alone, but together we do have tremendous power. And that is something that everyone who has spoken tonight has mentioned. Number 3, our common humanity is everything. I am a social psychologist. We are dark, cynical people who study everything is wrong with human beings. And one thing we have learned is that every human atrocity begins with dehumanizing the other. This is a slippery slope. If you do not understand the perspective of people that you disagree with, go learn about it. Try to find out and understand where they are coming from, how their experience and worldview differ from your own, and listen rather than trying to convince. If we all make an effort to do that, maybe we will be able to find common ground and get through this together.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. Your Holiness, it has been really a very rich dialogue filled with many gems. One of them actually that really struck me right at the beginning was simply your observation that in a certain way, we are the ones who have created our problems. But also then the message that was an equally profound and important message is we also have the capacity to overcome them. In a certain way, the challenges we face actually are also opportunities. And the message here that Lonnie has also just expressed, and also Alyssa as well, is a message that you emphasize so much, which is the importance of our common humanity, the oneness of our humanity. And realizing that as individuals, from what you have told us tonight, rests so importantly on the combination of wisdom and compassion, of seeing clearly and also connecting with others. That sense of our own capacity is something that I hope all of us are fills all of us with hope. And that as we go on from tonight, that we will feel really energized and filled with hope, but also filled with the confidence that together we can really do something that will lead to that long view that you mentioned, Your Holiness, where we will eventually overcome these challenges and create even a better world. So thank you very much, Your Holiness, for spending this time with us. And now for our final remarks, I will turn it over to the President of Mind and Life, my friend, Susan Bauer-Wu. Susan.
Thank you so much, John. Deep appreciation, Your Holiness, for spending all this time with us and for sharing your wisdom. So many wonderful reminders for the moment that we're in human history. And gratitude to the panel, Alyssa, Lonnie, John. It's a great panel. Thank you so much. All of us at Mind and Life wish Your Holiness continued good health. And we look forward to being together with you next year, hopefully in person. And until then, may Your Holiness and the many thousands of people joining us from all over the world right now, may you be safe and well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kasangatude Mind and Life institution. You see, life, when we use the word life, plant, these things also have some kind of life. But mind is something more complicated. The most, in a way, the troublemaker is our mind. Mind thinking right way, even difficult circumstances, you can keep peace of mind. If mind with suspicion, anger, like that, and even you say your room, very comfortable room, your mind may not be peaceful, including sound sleep. For me, a 9-hour sleep, always very peaceful. No anger, no fear. Very important. So therefore, you see, this is the question is happy person with peace of mind. That's our aim. Not talking next life, not talking about Buddha, not talking about God. Simply how to build happy, peaceful individual. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again. And I think a Mind and Life Institute I think really also create a lot of also new awareness. So I very much appreciate all those members who are working in our Mind Life Institute. I really appreciate. Thank you. Please carry continuously. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, previously always look external thing. Now, more and more people, you see, paying more attention about our mind, a question of peace of mind. So our institution really very, very helpful. Thank you very much. And the future, occasionally we will get a meeting. So till next meeting come, each day, each night should practice peace of mind, compassionate mind, so that, you see, each night, each day, be happy. Okay, thank you.